So with no further ado, please let's welcome Chris Chan.
Thanks very much. Okay, so if you've heard me speak before, you know I have a little bit of a shtick to my presentations. And part of that shtick, I have 4 goals for the next hour. And those 4 goals, 3 of them are for you, 1 of them is for me. And the first 3 are I want to entertain you, I want to teach you something about yourself, and then I want to teach you something you can use within your work. And then the last goal for myself is, selfishly, I want to be the best presentation that you've sat through over these 3 days. So I'll leave that up to you. But if you think those are good goals to have, I'm going to ask in return from you some audience participation. Okay, so if we can agree to that, I think we'll have a very successful session together today. So as part of that, I'm going to ask a question that I don't think has ever been asked on this stage at 8 o'clock in the morning. First, is Adam from Standard here? Those of you who dined with me last night know Adam. He was part of our group. And we all concluded at the end of the night that Adam knows how to have a good time and probably wouldn't show up to the 8 o'clock session. So I just wanted to pick on him for a moment. But since Adam isn't here to answer this question, I'll ask it of all of you. Anyone in the room like Corona? Okay, so we'll go right here. Donna, since I saw your hand go up first. Heather? Okay. So I got a lime also. If you'd like a bottle opener, I have that too, but maybe later. So that's my teaser for the presentation, because we're going to talk about a lot of stuff today. And if you only remember one thing from the presentation, it's think about Corona and find your beach, okay? I will plant that seed and let you think about that, and we'll return to it near the end of the presentation. So first, just a little bit about me. I'm an innovation imagineer at Mercer Labs, and in the lab, we are the Shark Tank function at Mercer. We've looked at over 300 new emerging healthcare companies in the last 20 months. And so we hear pitch after pitch after pitch, and we look at healthcare. We have colleagues in the financial services space and in the talent space, and there are thousands of new technologies and solutions and entrepreneurs trying to get your money and attention and your employees' attention as well. And so we think that we have a good pulse on emerging trends and ideas, and that's what the rest of this presentation is wrapped around. Just a little bit more about me. Lisa mentioned that I'm a blogger, and I have my own blog at TheArtofChan.com, and then I also write for Mercer's US healthcare blog. And I've written about things like Taylor Swift and Star Wars. My last 2 recent posts were about suicide and depression, which actually got a fair amount of traction and commentary, and then a trip to Machu Picchu that I took. And the point is to relate things going on in my life and the world around us to healthcare benefits, the employer perspective that you're all familiar with, and hopefully come up with something unique in response. If you couldn't tell from the name of my blog, I'm also an artist, and this is just some of my work. Very colorful, iconic, pop style, a picture tells 1,000 words. I share this because it translates into how I present, and so hopefully that comes across. But also, unfortunately, a number of my pieces are in response to things going on in the world. So we have the Boston Strong piece related to the Boston Marathon attack. The woman crying was in response to terrorist attacks in Paris. Latest piece is the Orlando Heart there, which was in response to that shooting. That was over 3 months ago. It feels like a lot longer than that, but that was just 3 months. And I shared that because This is my way of internalizing the things that are going on in the world and trying to respond. And I'm sure you are doing the same, and your employees are doing the same as well. And so we have to think about ways where, as corporate citizens, we help enable our employees to understand and be part of the greater community. Okay, so in the labs, we look at a lot of interesting things, lots of buzzwords that you're familiar with. But for today's presentation, what we put together is predictions about the future of work and HR. And we come up with these 10 categories to thematically wrap this conversation. We're going to talk about each of these, whether it's the incoming workforce, the interviewing process, compensation, benefits, the work environment, on and on and on through job automation, departure, and termination. But as you think about predictions, there are 3 types, really. There are the wild and crazy ones that are way out there, and maybe they'll happen 15, 20 years down the road, and they're fun to talk about, but they're actually not very helpful. And so I've heard some feedback from people in anticipation of this session today, right now. We really want to talk about the future and hear what's going to happen. And so we've got that covered, wild and crazy. But for those of you who are more realist, who want something that's actionable and tangible, we've got the it's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, but when. And it's probably next year, 2 years, 3 years. Some of it's happening right now. And so we've got the spectrum of it's going to happen, it's an educated guess, and wild and crazy. You'll also hear from 11 other people besides myself. And so here's Alan Cox. I figure lots of predictions is best. People will forget the ones that I get wrong and marvel over the rest. If you don't know who Alan Cox is, he was one of the creators of Linux, which runs in airplane entertainment systems and Nest thermometers and self-driving cars and nuclear submarines. So it's pretty powerful operating system stuff that's running behind the background that he helped create. So what that means is our 10 categories have now transformed through these 3 types of predictions into 23. And we have 130-ish slides to cover in the next hour. So I'm going to go really fast. Hopefully you can keep up. And apologies for the printed material, because I think I'm like 1/3 to 1/2 of all the printed content from the 3 days. If you'd like an updated presentation, email me, because this, what I'm going to present, is slightly updated versus what you have printed. Okay, a few caveats. For some of these, they may come true, they may not, and some of them conflict. And so we just wanted to be expansive with the ideas that we're covering today. Some of these may also feel like they may have a political tone to them, and that's not my intention at all. It is meant to have a social tone and provide some social commentary around things that are happening in our world and in our country, and just provide data around things that are happening and allow you to interpret your own results from there. So number 1, the new workforce of America. We got Taylor Swift. Unique and different is the new generation. You don't have to be like everybody else. So I'm a millennial, and I'm sick of hearing about millennials, as I'm sure you are. But now it's about Gen Z who's coming into the workforce. The oldest members of Gen Z are 21. And so they may be already parts of your workforce. And we know some things about them. They're more sophisticated and globally minded and connected. And they already represent 25% of the country. They get married later in life and have kids later in life as a result. And we've already seen that starting to transpire in terms of benefits like egg freezing and genetic testing, because there's more risks with having babies later in life. And they're entrepreneurial, they want to make a difference, they're always on their phones, right? And that's challenging. And oh, by the way, their attention span is 8 seconds, so we've moved on past them. Now, After Gen Z comes Gen Alpha. Now, this is my youngest son. This is the post-iPad generation, 2011 and beyond. And we don't know a lot about Gen Alpha, but my youngest son was like this baby. When he was 3, he would swipe at a magazine, because that's the world that he has grown up with. You know, any picture is an image that I can interact with. That's the reality. And we don't know a lot. We can guess. They're going to be more creative. They're going to look to idols like Steve Jobs and carve their own path and make a difference. Perhaps the most narcissistic generation that we've ever seen, the most socially connected and technologically connected to all parts of the globe, but perhaps the most lonely, where we don't know the people across the street or across the hallway, but we are connected around the world. And then those 2 bullet points in the lower left, I find a little bit disturbing. 2/3 of babies under 1 are exposed to 80 minutes of screen time a day, and by the time they're 7, kids will have spent an entire year in front of a screen. And if you pay attention, you see this. Like the kids in the shopping carts with the iPads or the phones, keeping them busy, or at the restaurants. It's like we don't have time to be bored or self-reflect and just observe the things that are going on in life. I think it's going to be catastrophic for this generation, in all honesty. Number 2, massively open online courses, MOOCs, will disrupt the education system. And this is an example of some of the companies: Udacity, Khan Academy, edX. Let's talk about this. This is the growth in MOOCs. It's certainly been on the rise. Online courses. We actually saw significant growth in Greece and Italy during their economic downturn, which makes sense because it's an easier, more cost-effective access to higher education. Here's one example. So this is edX, which is a MOOC. The first course that they taught was a physics course from MIT. So it was pretty high-powered, right? Highly technical, and you needed to be qualified in order to have the rigor to keep up with the class. They had 155,000 students enroll and 7,000 plus complete. So that completion rate doesn't sound great, but let's put some of this into perspective. 155,000 students enrolling is more people than MIT has alumni over the course of its 150-year history. This is in one class. They touch that many people. Now, 7,000 successful completions, if you were to do it the traditional method, teaching one class every semester, you would have to teach for 40 years to get to that completion rate. And so talk about completely transforming and shifting upside down the education system and being able to scale up much more successfully. So that's the power of MOOCs. And this is what it looks like. You know, you have the video course, and the teacher can write down notes and examples and have some real-time feedback and testing, and some of it's even free text where they analyze your responses to see if you're doing it correctly or not. And so that real-time reinforcement is really powerful. Here we have some chemical equations being inputted, so you can use it for more sophisticated things, and you got something right, you got something wrong. This is why this matters. So we talk about healthcare costs so much, and the rise of healthcare and how much has to be managed, but what outpaces healthcare costs? College tuition, right? Shockingly so. And now, lots of companies are looking at student loan consolidation, repayment. I know there's a few companies that give $150 of student loan credit every quarter to the incoming generation population, and they're trying to target millennials, right? And restructure benefits that make sense for a generation that has significant student loan debt. But employers aren't quite yet sold. So if you approach an employer with an online degree, this is the response. Just 17% of employers would prefer an applicant with an online degree from a top university versus a job applicant with a traditional degree from an average school. So online is a bigger decrement than quality or place of the certification. Number 2, hiring. Tina Fey here. In most cases, being a good boss means hiring talented people and getting out of their way. I completely agree. So the hiring process, I believe, is going to completely shift. This is an it's going to happen. This is a Mercer product that we came out with that we've been testing. It's called Mercer Match, and it's through gameplay. Can you evaluate and personality type candidates and match them up to jobs that we know those certain types of personalities are more successful? So for example, salespeople are more successful when they take bigger risks. Those salespeople that take bigger risks have bigger home runs in terms of sales. Those that don't take risks, they do all right, but their wins are much more average versus big home runs. So how do you take and evaluate risk? This is a balloon tapping game, and every time you tap on the balloon, the money in the upper right-hand corner goes up. So it's at 50 cents, you can keep tapping, and I've played this, you can get up to $20 if you take the risk. But the balloon can explode at any time. That's the catch. So do you try to maximize your wins and keep on blowing up the balloon, or do you say, well, I've got $3, let's collect that and keep it safe and move on to the next balloon? And then the second example here is gauging emotion and reading facial expressions. And millennials are terrible at this. Zs will be worse, and alphas will be even worse because we're so digitally connected. You hear about couples who don't know how to have a real conversation or get into arguments because they can't read facial expression and body language because most of their interaction is via digital devices, which is tragic, right? That's the new generation that's coming into your workforce. So let's try some of this. This is some interaction here. So I want to hear from you what emotion you think this is. Just shout it out. Happy, amused. Okay, we got happy. How about this one? Amazed, surprised, anger, fear. Okay. This one? Anger. Yeah, good. We all recognize that one. How about this last one? Surprise? Disgust. Okay, so we did all right. Number 4, this one's wild and crazy. Interviewing will become a reality TV show. All right? Wow, that's really out there. I don't know about this. But maybe. So how about this concept of blind interviewing, like The Voice? So we've heard about this term called unconscious bias. Well, here's an example that comes from orchestras. And what they found was they actually had a disproportionate number of male representatives versus female representatives. So they started doing blind auditions behind this screen here. And you increase from fewer than 5% women in the 70s to more than 30% today. And here's just the data that supports that increase over time. Why does this matter? So you can look at studies that show that your name and geographic location that you put on your resume will bias whether or not you get a callback. And white names receive 50% more callbacks from interviews, and a higher quality resume, the list is 30% more callbacks, whereas if you're African American and have the same resume, and they've done studies where they just change the names on the resumes and everything else is exactly the same. And we see these differences translating out, unfortunately. So in the future, will we enter some virtual reality environment that masks the identity of the person from a visual and vocal perspective and translates what they're saying into some computerized digital environment where we don't know if it's a man or a woman, white, black, Asian, whatever. Maybe. That's wild and crazy, takes a lot of technical sophistication to pull that off, but maybe that's what things will go to, perhaps. This is why it matters. There are a lot of companies that have embraced inclusion, diversity, but also linked it to innovation and creativity and business performance. And the more diverse the group, the wider range of ideas that you get, the wider range of possibilities that you consider. And at the end of the day, that translates into a better end product. And so they're connecting diversity and inclusion to business results. This is Apple, Merck, and Johnson & Johnson. Okay, topic number 3, compensation. We got Walt Disney here. You reach a point where you don't work for money. I'm not there yet. I hope to be someday. I hope you are as well. So we've talked about tuition. This is unsustainable. This is just another graph. And this idea of other funding methods around tuition besides the direct loan. So some of these ideas we dreamt up in our labs and then we researched them, and they actually already have a term that's out there. So this one's called income share agreements. And the idea is similar to how you would invest in a stock and reap a return on the performance, good or bad, of that stock. Companies will invest in people and identify potential high performers while they're in college and say, okay, we're going to give you, this amount of salary. We're going to pay off some of your debt as a percentage of that salary, and as the salary goes up, that percentage goes up, so your success equals our success as well. And so thinking about people as investments, potentially. It's wild and crazy. All these ideas in compensation are wild and crazy. But this is why it's important, because the class of 2015 has the biggest amount of debt that we've ever seen, $35,000 on average. Number 6 on wild and crazy. This is probably the most politically charged and contentious idea, that the government will pay a living wage. Now, they tried this in Switzerland. I don't know if you followed the vote earlier this summer, but the citizens by far shot this idea down. 77% voted no. But the idea was the government would give people about $30,000 a year just because you're a citizen, just because you showed up. And the argument against is when you disconnect work from pay, you get poor performance. People don't have an incentive to do a good job. So that's why people didn't support it. But here's the problem, right? We are living in an age where corporate profits are completely outpacing income increases and salary wage increases. And you can just see the productivity per hour that companies get from the workforce has trended significantly higher than pay. This translates into have and have not. So I know there was an economist who opened up the keynote at the start of the presentation. You will see there are some similar themes between her presentation and mine, but hopefully you like mine more. So here's the have and have nots, and this is the problem. So the top 1% controls 35% of the country's net worth, and the bottom 40% owns 0. And we're at the point in time where there's the greatest wealth inequity in the country since the Great Depression. So how do we solve this? Should we solve this? I don't know. People point to minimum wage, and you look at the federal minimum wage population here, it's certainly come down from the spike during the Great Recession, which is good, but you can see 2008, 2009, 2010, it ticked up, and now it's leveled off a little bit. But who is the minimum wage population? So you typically think of someone who's just starting out in their career, but you can see there is a long tail and a significant part of the workforce who at some point in their life, at some age in their life, will be working for minimum wage. I saw this and was really shocked at the number of people in that tail. And you think it's a teenager working after school, living with their parents, but the reality is the average person is 35, and 36% are 40 or older, 28% have kids, and on average, they earn half of their family's total income. And so people are trying to survive off of minimum wage. That's the takeaway here. And why is this a problem? So you look at how much housing costs in the country by state and how many hours of minimum wage you have to work. And we have the peaks with California and New York, where you have to work 90 to close to 100 hours a week to be able to afford a one-bedroom rental on average within those states. And even the best states in gray, you have to work 60 hours a week or more. Topic number 4, benefits. So this is Howard Schultz. We built Starbucks first with our people, hire and train great people, and invest in employees. So on the benefits side, whether it's talent, healthcare, financial health, we see an explosion of startups. And at Mercer, we have innovation teams focused on each of those areas, and we have slides with logos after logos, just like this. And it's completely overwhelming, I'm sure, for all of you in the room. How do you keep up? But interestingly, what this is translating to is very unique siloed benefits. So we've tried vanilla, spreading it all around the whole population and seeing if people engage. And you know what? People don't engage because they don't care enough about that area. It could be wellness. It could be sleep or stress. And we're all dealing with these things, but it's not acute enough of a pain for us to engage. But we're seeing really unique areas emerge, like women's health or minority health or the LGBT population. That's very unique and focused in the area that it's trying to touch. And we're seeing high engagement in response. So let's talk about some of these. These are Google search trends by topic. So minority health has leveled off. This is over the course of 10 plus years. So it's come down a ways. You see women's health and gender equality moving up, and then certainly LGBT with Caitlyn Jenner spiking last year. Why is this important? So as we look out to the demographic change within the country, what population is shrinking? It's the white Caucasian population that's nearly cutting in half over the course of the next 40 plus years. And the population that's growing the most in green, Hispanic. So we see new companies like Consejo Sano, which is using doctors, mental health professionals, and nutritionists in Mexico City to talk to Spanish speakers here in the States. Extremely cost-effective, unlimited usage, really interesting but narrowly focused benefit around the Hispanic population. On the gender equality women's health side, this is the trend over time of the percentage of adults who work. So in black is the average, in blue is men, and you can see how it's tapering down, and in pink is women and how it's rising up. And then this is the LGBTQ population. On Facebook, the number of people who have publicly identified themselves as part of this group. And in purple is the highest percentage. It's 4%, which is the national average. And you can see on the coast where that's the highest, and then in green, 2%. But this is translating into new types of benefits. I know transgender came up during the regulatory conversation, and we're seeing that translate into benefit design and behavioral, emotional counseling, non-surgical options, surgical, gender affirmation, reconstructive, complications, travel, centers of excellence. The list goes on. But there's a lot of perspectives to look at if you were to think about this type of benefit for your population, how to evaluate that. Number 8, this is translating into lots of new benefits, but we talked about individual have and have-nots. Now we have corporate have and have-nots. So there are those companies that are more profitable who can say, hey, let's put in this benefit and this benefit and this benefit. And I don't have to think about an ROI necessarily. Part of what we think about is the cool factor, because we want to be one of the best places to work. Right? That's their philosophy. And then you have those that maybe at the bottom of this list who are like, costs do matter. We have to be smart and sophisticated in how we evaluate, and we can't just offer everything under the sun. But those cool places are attracting millennials and Zs, and they're creating new types of workplaces, and they may have a woodworking shop on campus to help people express their creativity. Or you can get your haircuts on site and bring your pet and take a slide, and we'll have sleeping pods and relaxation centers, and they've created entire towns and cities on their campus because they don't want you to leave. They're trying to account for every single thing that you might need and wrap it around all of this. And this takes a lot of money. And certainly most companies can't do this. But in the war for talent, if I'm a potentially high-performing millennial or just a high-performing employee in general, I want the place that has the perks. Right? And this is translating into retention. The more perks that you have, the more likely you are to stay. This is a study from MetLife. And if you have less than 5 perks, intent to stay versus 11 to 15. Wild and crazy, number 9 on the benefit side. Insurance drones will monitor your activity and adjust your premiums. So this is the idea of a big brother health plan. You don't have to track your steps and what you eat yourself because I am, or a drone is. I have visions of Annette in a drone flying around, just recording what people are doing, which is really scary. But why do we think this might happen? So there's significant uptake in commercial and privately owned drones that we're going to see. And companies are already starting to use drones to insure products. This is AIG, and they're using it on the property side to look at damage or the value of something that may be difficult to get to, like an oil rig, and fly these things around to project potential costs.
Fast the jogger goes, Joggerbot stays that distance ahead.
This is
rain can affect its ability to fly,
robot,
and wind can blow it off course. But as long as Joggerbot can find the colored panel again,
slows down or speeds up depending on how fast you're going. And so different types of uses for drones. Now, this idea of the Etna drone may sound outlandish, and certainly lots of privacy issues related to that. But some of this is already happening today. This is a company called Ginger.io, and they look at when you unlock your phone, whether it's the middle of the night, who you text, who you respond back to, how long those texts are, same with phone calls, how far your phone moves from its home outside its base, and it calculates all that data to determine whether or not you're clinically depressed. Now these things, that sounds really scary, but these things offer a window into our soul. We keep them on us nearly 24/7. And certainly there's a user agreement here, and you understand what you're getting yourself into. But the technology already exists. And I think people will trade privacy for convenience and value. If it provides enough value for me, either monetarily or intellectually, I will give up a little bit of privacy. All right. Work environment. This comes from the movie Office Space. Human beings were not meant to sit in little cubicles staring at computer screens all day. So this is the connected office. It's going to happen. Sensors in everything. We've heard about the Internet of Things. There's going to be the Office of Things, where it's the lights and the chairs, and every single object in an office place could have a sensor that monitors, we need more staples, or more paper, or this security threat is potentially going to occur, or this person needs access to this room, etc., etc. And so this is from a company called Techno. They did a mock-up of what this would look like. You can see on the conference room, access to scheduling, who to invite, whether or not you have access. When you walk in, the table has the materials on the table itself. and you can pull them up in real time and be prepared for the conversation. So really far out there, Minority Report type of stuff, but it's going to happen. Why? This is a graph of connected devices, and you can see cars and TVs and wearables, and the biggest emerging wedge is the Internet of Stuff that's out there. But this will come with problems or risks, especially around privacy and security and who protects all of this information flow. It's not whether you're going to be hacked, it's when, right? It's going to happen. How do you prepare? So here's a guy that's in a train station, and he's using, it's an old phone, so I have no idea how he's doing this, but he's hacking into the display at the train station, and you can see it's pulling up his camera feed from the phone, and he's announcing to everyone in the train station that all the trains have been canceled. Right? And he's playing a prank. That's scary that this type of stuff can happen. Number 11, wild and crazy. Employers will rent out office space as housing. This one's really out there. You think about economic resources and having offices empty at night. And could they be livable spaces? I don't know. It's crazy, but we're seeing the emergence of mega regions around the country where there's more population density, and people are commuting an hour, 2 hours plus. I know a guy who commutes from Las Vegas to San Francisco every day. He takes the first flight in and the last flight out. Crazy stuff people are doing because of the cost of housing. And that's only going to go up as population density increases. Part of the other problem is when you are a millennial or a Z and you're coming out of the dorm environment. I'm sure some of you have colleges or kids in college or university, and you've seen some of these dorms that on the left is a real dorm. That's how it comes furnished. And that's amazing, right? They're trying to attract students to their campus, and so that's why they've created really amazing dorm facilities for people. And then when you graduate, you might find yourself in this apartment building in New York where the shower is literally in the kitchen, right? Who wants that? That sounds horrible. So some companies are starting to build corporate housing. I know The Economist talked about Foxconn a little bit. So this is Foxconn in China. And at the bottom, they have a swimming pool and an internet cafe. And I guess that looks nice. But on the top, you look at the surrounding building and the barracks. I guess it looks like a prison, or you're in the army. So not so nice. But then you hear about Facebook. This is one of their largest projects. They are building an apartment complex directly off across the street from their main campus. And they're trying to truly create the entire town system where you can come and go and not really have to need anything else outside of Facebook for your everyday needs. It's all tied to the war for talent. All right, we're halfway through, so hopefully you're keeping up. Number 6, onboarding, training, and development. Muhammad Ali, I hated every minute of training, but I said, don't quit, suffer now, and live the rest of your life as a champion. We're getting to number 12. It's going to happen. I know some companies who already do this. Personality typing and matching team members and structuring complementary teams based on personality type. And there's Myers-Briggs and Strength Finders and Enneagram, which looks really complicated to me. So we're going to play a quick game here. There's a bunch of words on the screen. I just want you to look at the screen and pick out 2 or 3 that resonate with you, that you identify with. I'll give you 10 seconds to do that. Okay, you got your words? Now keep thinking about your words and pay attention to the color that those words shifted to, that you chose. And if you can remember those colors, this is a very quick and dirty personality typing exercise that's linked to a framework called HBDI. Herman brain dominance instruments, and if you remember your colors, those fall within these 4 categories, and this is the way the brain is split at a very simplistic level: left brain, right brain, cerebral versus limbic. Then you can see quantitative, process, ideation, and human emotion. And there's a full-blown assessment that you can take to see where exactly you fall. The reason why we bring this up is diagonals hate working with each other. So if you're really creative out there thinking about the future, the process person thinks, well, there's step A, B, C, D, E to get all the way to Z. What about all those challenges and roadblocks? And then if you're results-focused, quantifiable things versus feelings, they don't get along so much. They can complement, certainly. We also marry our diagonals, usually, because that allows us to run complementary households. I'm very yellow, my wife is very green, and she does all the planning and organization in the house. Number 13, training systems will adapt to your skill level. So video games certainly do this very well. This ties into this concept of adaptive training that will overcome learned helplessness. What does that mean? That's just a bunch of gibberish. I don't know. So I have an interactive example in front of you. We're going to go through a word scramble. So you should have a piece of paper that has a couple word scrambles in front of you, and we're just going to work on number 1 right now at the top, and each word transforms into another word. So that's what a word scramble is, and after you've finished number 1 and figured it out, I want you to raise your hand, okay? All right. Looks like we're ready to move on to word number 2. So let's unscramble word number 2. Okay? I see eager people wanting to raise their hands, so once you figure that out, all right. And now let's move on to number 3 on the word scramble and see if they get progressively harder. So this might take a little. Raise the hands high on number 3 if you figured it out. Okay, great. So let's go over the answers. So what you don't know is the back half of the room had a different piece of paper within the front half of the room. And if you were in the back half of the room, you saw people in the front raising their hands, and you probably were like, wow, I feel stupid because I can't figure this stuff out, right? And so the back half of the room had whirl and slapstick, which are impossible. They don't translate into anything, right? It's just gibberish. The front half of the room had bat and lemon, okay? So the front half of the room feels really smart, and you should have gotten tab and melon, okay? Now, everyone had the same last word. What I saw, what Lisa saw, is there were people in the front who solved the third one, and no one in the back. Everyone in the back had already given up. You're like, this is a stupid exercise, I can't do this, so screw it, right? But you got people in the front who are like, yeah, I got number 1, I got number 2, I can figure out number 3. And there were a sprinkling of hands. This is kind of hard, but it translates into American, okay? And so what does this mean? If training or if our job is too hard, we give up. But those people who are led to little successes keep trying, and ultimately will have bigger success at the end of the day. So that's adaptive training, which will overcome learned helplessness. Okay. Number 7, feedback and performance reviews. We have Elon Musk. It's very important to have a feedback loop where you constantly are thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. So feedback and performance reviews. I know people love this stuff, right? And we see the same parallels between active management of our health and active management around performance. People don't like to track steps. They don't like to track the food that they eat. They don't like to give performance reviews. Anything where I actively have to manage something and stay involved in the process, we just don't like it. And so this idea of passive tracking, Ginger.io and that behavioral health analysis, around whether we're depressed or not, that's passive analysis. It's happening in the background. So here's passive analysis around feedback reviews. It could just be a component here, but your network determines your net worth to your company. And so this is looking at email traffic flow, and you can see who are the central hubs that are most important to your organization. Who has strong ties to senior leadership? Who gets email responses back? Who can rally the troops and get people engaged in a project? You can look at all this stuff through email flow. And so perhaps instead of just relying on performance feedback, do you start looking at some of the quantitative stuff that's happening behind the scenes that's passive and automated and helps streamline some of the process. It's a little big brother, for sure, but there's a lot of power in terms of how strong people's networks are. Also on the feedback and performance review side, what if we gave letter grades for projects? You know, at the end of completion, people get evaluated on a system that we all grew up with. We're all familiar with this. We understand the concept. It does come with challenges, though. So when the grading system was first rolled out in the 1940s, a C was average. Most people got C's, and only the best people got A's. And you see how over time that's flipped. And we have millennials and Gen Zs and alphas who just get certificates for showing up and participation ribbons, and we get the A's, and we expect that now when we enter the workforce. I'm sure you're seeing it with the new workforce that's entitled, and they want to be promoted, and they want to run projects and the whole department right out of school, right? And it's hard to meet these expectations because this is what we've created. We've created little monsters who think that they're the best and better than average. Well, you can't have everyone who's better than average. Number 8, security and safety. Benjamin Franklin, anyone who trades liberty and security deserves neither liberty nor security. We're going to speed through some of these. Again, back to the Internet of Things and the Office of Things, monitors and sensors, thermostats, windows. This camera is looking at this woman in the image who's stealing something and sending an alert. We're going to have little RFID trips that track not just UPS trucks, but potentially people as they move through the office or across the country. Very big brother and scary, but if you have some benefits, like maybe entering a house with your swipe of your hand, I don't know, some people might go for that. This is even more big brother. So security cameras at a mall zooming in on a restaurant and what people are eating and pulling up the caloric intake for those people. It could happen. Number 9, automation of work. Bill Gates, automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. Automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. So we have to be careful about what we operationalize. But we've seen it certainly in the blue-collar segment where manufacturing jobs have been replaced by robots. And you walk into a car facility and it's amazing to see the robotics in action. Now it's moving into the restaurant business, and you probably see those little iPad kiosks, little tablets where you can order food and get the server's attention and more drinks and things like that. It's supposed to make things more efficient, but they're cutting down on their labor costs as well. And then in Japan, they actually have robots that deliver. And then the robotic bartender. That's fun. I'm going to skip past that, but that's the new cruise ship from Royal Caribbean that has 2 robotic bartenders actively working in service, and they make the exact drink every single time. They're not too heavy on the pour, unfortunately, but that helps manage labor costs and product costs for the cruise ship. And it's translated into a reduction in manufacturing jobs, obviously. Okay, but now we see it shifting to the white-collar workforce as well. And so this is interesting and scary. And so there's a company that we work with called Progeny around infertility. And they would, traditionally, physicians would base on gut experience what embryo is the healthiest to implant during IVF. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But computers can actually do it better, looking at photographic analysis. So now you have a computer making a recommendation that a provider is just signing off on and agreeing with the recommendation. We've seen it on the financial services side, where one analyst could be looking at tens of monitors at once. I can't even stare at 2, let alone 16, or whatever this guy is looking at. And that's because the computers are processing transactions faster than the human brain can keep up with, and that has challenges as well. So we have the flash crash that occurred where stocks plummet because something goes wrong within the algorithm, and so we have to watch out for computers doing things faster than we can comprehend. But jobs are being outsourced and automated, and here's the probability that your job will be taken over by a robot in the next 20 years. Telemarketer, auditors, retail salespeople, good luck. So, fun examples here. Here's a computer solving Mario in real time, and all the red lines are where the Mario character could land with success, and the computer is playing the game. Here is one computer program creating the level in real time, and another computer problem solving it. And so now we get increased complexity that a human brain could not navigate, but a computer is successful to do. So they're doing things like software development. And back to facial recognition and Mercer match, we're teaching computers to read facial expression better than we can. And this is a guy that's teaching a computer, and the computer output there. Robots as caretakers, helping nurses. Here's 3 articles that are written. There's a mix of human and computer writers here. So, in the interest of time, I will let you know who wrote what. It's kind of scary. Sometimes you'll pick it up when you're reading stuff externally, like the wording isn't quite right. Chances are a computer wrote it, but they're getting better. And then, now we extend to the areas where there's not a right answer, and robots are getting into creative and artistic endeavors, which is interesting and scary. Number 20, robot overlords. Terminator someday, maybe, but this is from Boston Dynamics. This certainly looks Terminator-ish with the robot. Army's obviously looking at stuff like this. And then this one that goes 35 miles an hour, which would be completely terrifying if it was hunting you down. But we are seeing the robotic human, so it's not just robotics versus us. We're seeing people starting to take this stuff into their being. And these are all the sensors that are available today that people could wear. And there's hundreds more as well. But maybe this is how we evolve. We're already seeing it. This is a guy who implanted a biometric sensor, had some non-licensed professional stitch him up, and he can read his biometrics and charge it wirelessly through his skin, which is really creepy. All right, last topic here, departure and termination. Most people work just hard enough not to get fired and get paid just enough money not to quit. So on departures and termination, there's software today that can look at where people are leaving to in their next job and the job after that, and helping you think about your retention and competitive benefit strategies and inform your strategic direction based on this type of data, which is interesting. Number 22, the aging employee. People will work forever. It's because we haven't saved enough money. In blue is how much people have saved on average at that age stage, and in red is how much they should have. So the red always outstrips the blue, unfortunately. And so as people live longer, Will we have to work forever? That's really depressing. But we are seeing retirement ages tick up in the country as a result. And then the last prediction, number 23, work will cease to exist. So this sounds neat and fun, right? But it's often in response to all the automation and robotics and the likelihood that your job is going to be outsourced and the increased labor productivity that we get from robots that can work 24/7 versus normal human beings. And we're already seeing it. This is a restaurant in San Francisco called Pizza, and they have 11 ordering stations, and your food magically appears behind these little windows. And there's people in the back preparing the food, but in the restaurant itself is just one person offering technical support. They're running the whole restaurant on the front side with just one person, and everything happens behind the scenes. So they've reduced jobs. So, if work ceases to exist, as I wrap up here, is this our future? Maybe. It takes me back to Corona and Find Your Beach, because this is their latest ad campaign. And this is the longest thread that I've had between my opening teaser for something and how we wrap this up. But what does Find Your Beach mean in the future? And we see a new economy, whether it's the gig economy or the on-demand or the self-employed, the entrepreneur, we're all a startup. What does that mean? We see people like Bohemian Findings who have wildly successful Etsy shops. They do over $500,000 in revenue a year just making these little trinkets. Or people like PewDiePie who just play video games and generally act stupid on the internet, and he has millions of followers, and I think he makes, I don't know, between $1 and $2 million a year, just based off of YouTube revenue. Or people who are makeup professionals, like Michelle Phan, or creating music careers, or Lou on Unbox Therapy, who just unboxes products. Gets products sent to him for free and unboxes them online and has hundreds of thousands of subscribers. So in summary, we talked about a lot of things. One of the caveats that I failed to mention at the beginning is some of you will hate this presentation because I cover way too much stuff in an hour and I don't go deep enough. But the idea is just to plant a little seed around what the future might be and have one or two of these ideas stick with you. And trying to sum up all of this stuff that we talked about falls into 4 categories: technology, social change, social, and wealth. And if we group all of that together, my takeaway for the presentation is that technology and social change will create social wealth. I think the automation, the technology, the robotics will increase efficiency and profitability, and our living as a society positively. I'm hopeful for that future, but I think we need better distribution around that output and who benefits from all those economic gains. So one last quote for you: the best way to predict your future is to create it. Abraham Lincoln. And I'm out of time, but I have one last exercise. So I'm going to ask everyone to stand up for me as we wrap this up. And if your birthday is on an odd day, I want you to go like this. And if your birthday is on an even day, I want you to go like this. And if you've done this exercise before, I apologize, but I'm just going to take a couple pictures of a standing ovation. So, thank you very much. That's all I've got.
Are you able to stick around for questions?